Arthur Pendelton moved through life with the precision of a well-oiled machine. His red pen, poised over a stack of essays, was an extension of his will, a symbol of order in a world he meticulously controlled. Every misplaced comma, every grammatical sin, met its swift, decisive judgment. He picked up the next paper, its corners dog-eared, its pages faintly creased. Maya Jensen, another C-, perhaps a D. Her academic career at Northwood High was a consistent testament to mediocrity, a frustrating pattern of missed deadlines and half-hearted attempts. Arthur sighed, a barely perceptible exhalation that spoke of long-held professional disappointment. He expected little, yet still found himself bracing for the inevitable errors. His gaze, sharp and unsparing, scanned the first paragraph, marking a split infinitive, a comma splice. Then, near the bottom of the page, a word leaped out, not for its glaring incorrectness, but for its profound, impossible familiarity. The sunset was truly *breathtakingly, *beautiful. Maya had written, splitting the compound word with a hyphen where none belonged. Arthur's red pen froze, hovering inches above the paper. A jolt, cold and electric, shot through him, shattering the calm of the late afternoon. His breath caught. It couldn't be. That hyphen, that peculiar, endearing error, was a ghost from a life he had buried for 50 years. The sterile classroom dissolved into the vibrant chaos of a high school art room. Decades ago, sunlight streamed through paint-splattered windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Young Arthur, then a gangly boy with ink-stained fingers, sat beside Evelyn, her easel a riot of color. She'd just scrawled a note to him, her artistic hand translating her free spirit onto paper. Your sketch of the old oak is *breathtakingly, *good art. It read, the familiar hyphen a charming flaw. He'd chuckled, teasing her gently. Evelyn, it's one word. No hyphen. She'd laughed, a sound like wind chimes, her eyes, the color of a summer sky, twinkling. But it takes my breath, Arthur. It deserves a pause, a moment to appreciate the taking of it. Her smile, radiant and unburdened, was a masterpiece he'd never forgotten. Back in the quiet classroom, the scent of antiseptic cleaner replaced turpentine. Arthur's eyes, now clouded with unshed tears, squeezed shut. Evelyn. Her laughter, her vibrant spirit, the naive logic behind that simple, unique error. The red pen, no longer a weapon of grammatical correction, slipped from his trembling fingers, clattering softly onto the desk. It was impossible. A coincidence, nothing more. Yet a raw, aching certainty bloomed in his chest. A 50-year-old wound, carefully stitched and hidden, had just been ripped open by a single, misplaced hyphen. Could fate truly be so cruel, or so incredibly kind, as to offer a ghost of his past in the handwriting of a struggling student? He had to know. The meticulously organized silence of Arthur Pendelton's apartment offered no solace. The digital clock on his bedside table glowed an unwavering 2:37 a.m., a stark mockery of his usual punctual slumber. Arthur lay rigid, staring at the ceiling, the shadows cast by his reading lamp mimicking the tangled thoughts in his mind. The precise cogs of his internal clock had jammed, utterly derailed by a single peculiar spelling error. Breathtakingly, the word echoed, a faint, insistent whisper from a past he had painstakingly buried. It couldn't be a coincidence. Fate, he had long believed, was a construct of the weak-minded, a flimsy excuse for lack of discipline. Yet this felt like an undeniable hand, reaching across decades, pulling at the carefully constructed walls of his ordered life. He closed his eyes, the memory of Evelyn vivid, insistent. What was he going to do? The sterile, fluorescent hum of the Northwood High faculty lounge did little to calm Arthur's uncharacteristic anxiety the next morning. Clutching a mug of lukewarm coffee, he approached Mr. Henderson, a jovial history teacher known for his encyclopedic knowledge of student gossip. Henderson, Arthur began, his voice a fraction too stiff. A moment of your time, if you please. Henderson, mid-bite of a donut, grunted an affirmative. It's about Maya Jensen, Arthur continued, feigning a professional frown. Her academic performance, it's inconsistent. I was wondering if you knew anything about her home situation? Any, extenuating circumstances? Henderson chewed thoughtfully. Jensen? Bright kid, but quiet. Absent a fair bit. Parents are, well, I think it's just her mother. Never seen a father. Why, is she causing trouble? Arthur forced a dismissive wave. No trouble at all. Just trying to understand her. Unique learning challenges. Henderson shrugged, oblivious. Kids these days, eh? Always something. Arthur retreated, the casual conversation yielding nothing but a confirmation of Maya's quiet struggles and a hollow ache of frustration. He needed more. The memory hit him with the force of a physical blow, sharper than any red pen. Autumn, 1970-something. The park bench was cold beneath them, leaves spiraling down in hues of fire and gold. Evelyn's hand in his, surprisingly warm, but trembling. Her usually vibrant eyes, the color of a stormy sea, were swollen with unshed tears. Arthur, she'd whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustle of leaves. I have to leave. Tonight. His world had fractured. What? No, Evelyn, what are you talking about? Where are you going? He remembered the desperate grip of his hand on hers, the fear in his own young voice. They're sending me away. To an aunt. Far away. It's for the best, they say. Her words were fragmented, laced with a confusion that mirrored his own. I don't understand. We were going to run away, remember? To study art, to write, to be free. She'd shaken her head, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. I can't. They've made it impossible. Please, Arthur, don't try to find me. Just remember me. Then a car, black and imposing, had appeared as if from a nightmare, and she was gone, leaving him on that cold bench, clutching only the ghost of her touch and a lifetime of unanswered questions. The school administration office, usually bustling with the energetic chaos of Northwood, was now a cavern of hushed shadows. The only light emanated from the computer screen Arthur had cautiously powered on. His heart hammered an irregular rhythm against his ribs, a traitorous drumbeat against the silence. Every fiber of his being screamed against this transgression. Arthur Pendelton, the paragon of rules, the arbiter of order, was breaking every professional code. But the desperate hope, the impossible flicker of Evelyn, propelled him forward. His hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he navigated the school's archaic student information system. He found Maya Jensen's file. His breath hitched. The screen's glow illuminated his strained face, reflecting a man caught between his rigid principles and an overwhelming, long-suppressed yearning. The cursor hovered over the parent/guardian section. This was it, the point of no return. The name shimmered on the screen, a beacon, a challenge, a ghost. Hey, Jensen, Evelyn. Arthur's world tilted. Evelyn. His, Evelyn, the name he had whispered in dreams and buried in his heart for decades. It was there, undeniably, linked to Maya. A wave of hope, so potent it bordered on terror, washed over him. Could it truly be? After all these years, this improbable, astonishing connection. His fingers instinctively reached out, as if to touch the glowing letters, to confirm their reality. Disbelief warred with a gut-deep certainty. The girl in his class, the one with the familiar, endearing flaw in her writing, was a direct link to the central, agonizing mystery of his life. He had to find her. He had to know everything. The past, it seemed, was not content to remain buried. The worn linoleum of Maya Jensen's apartment kitchen felt cold beneath her sneakers, a stark contrast to the buzzing energy of Northwood High. But the moment the door clicked shut behind her, the weight of the school day, the relentless pressure of assignments, the low thrum of adolescent drama, all faded. Here, in the small, cluttered space, a different kind of burden awaited. Her mother Evelyn sat by the window, a faded shawl draped over her shoulders, her gaze fixed on the rain-streaked pane. Evelyn's silver hair, once vibrant like a summer storm, was now wispy and dull. Her eyes, the color of a faded sky, held a quiet confusion. "Mom?" "I'm home," Maya said, her voice softer than any teacher at school would believe. She moved with practiced efficiency, shedding her backpack, dropping it beside a stack of medical pamphlets. The air in the apartment always smelled faintly of antiseptic and old paper. She knelt beside her mother, gently taking Evelyn's frail hand. It was cool, almost translucent. "Did you have a good day?" Evelyn offered a vague, gentle smile, a ghost of her former self. "The stars. They're out early today, aren't they, sweet pea?" Maya's heart ached. "No, Mom, it's still afternoon. The daily ritual, a quiet, heartbreaking dance between presence and absence." Maya squeezed her mother's hand, a weary but determined resolve etched onto her tired face. Later, as the twilight deepened, painting the tiny kitchen in shades of bruised purple, Maya sat hunched over the formica table, illuminated by the single, flickering fluorescent light above. Spread before her was a grim tableau, a stack of envelopes, each a fresh wound. Medical bills, stark white and demanding, piled higher than her textbooks. A notice from the landlord, hinting at overdue rent. Another, more ominous, mentioning eviction. Each paper felt like a physical blow, stripping away another layer of her already thin armor. Her mind, usually sharp in its assessment of literary themes, now struggled to comprehend the impenetrable language of deductibles and copays. She ran a hand through her unkempt brown hair, tugging at the roots. How could she possibly keep up? How could she protect her mother from this relentless tide? The numbers swam before her eyes, a rising flood that threatened to drown them both. Despair, cold and heavy, settled in her chest, a familiar companion. Maya moved to the living room, settling onto the worn sofa beside her mother. Evelyn was humming now, a tuneless melody that drifted like smoke. Maya reached for a well-worn poetry book, reading aloud in a soft, even tone, hoping the rhythm would soothe. Suddenly, Evelyn's head turned, her eyes, for a fleeting moment, sharpening, focusing on Maya with an intensity that had become heartbreakingly rare. "He loved the stars," Evelyn murmured, her voice frail but surprisingly clear, a whisper from a distant past. "A kind boy. Always looking up. Said they were like promises." Maya's breath hitched. This was new. This was a crack in the fog. "Who, Mom? Who loved the stars?" she pressed, her heart thrumming with a desperate sudden hope. Evelyn blinked, the clarity already fading, like a star winking out in the dawn. Her gaze drifted back to the window, the faint smile returning. "So many stars," she whispered, her voice once again lost in the quiet confusion of her illness. Maya's hand instinctively reached for her mother's, holding tight to the faint echo of a memory, a tantalizing, cryptic clue to a past she knew nothing about. Miles away, in the sterile quiet of his meticulously organized apartment, Arthur Pendelton clutched his phone, the silence of his evening apartment amplifying the hum of the dial tone. He had chosen the investigator carefully, a man recommended by a former colleague for his discretion and his uncanny ability to unearth forgotten truths. "Yes, Mr. Harrison," Arthur began, his voice low, a stark departure from his classroom authority. "I need you to locate a woman, Evelyn Jensen." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the polished surfaces of his living room, a stark contrast to the image of Maya's apartment that now haunted his mind. She would have been in high school in the mid-1970s. I have reason to believe she may have been adopted. Any records pertaining to an adoption, her birth parents, anything at all. He gave the PI Maya's name and the school's information, careful to frame his request as a matter of academic concern for a struggling student's welfare. "Discretion is paramount, Mr. Harrison. I do not want her to know she's being investigated." The detective's voice, a clipped, efficient monotone, confirmed the assignment. Arthur hung up, the phone feeling heavy in his hand. The line had been crossed. His ordered world was now irrevocably tangled in the threads of a half-century-old mystery, driven by a hope he hadn't dared to acknowledge until now. The following morning, the crisp, professional atmosphere of Principal Davies's office felt like a tribunal. Sunlight, usually a welcome presence, seemed to highlight every speck of dust in the air, every crease in Arthur's impeccably tailored suit. Principal Davies, a woman whose demeanor was as sharp and unyielding as her perfectly coiffed silver hair, sat opposite him, her hands folded neatly on her desk. "Arthur," she began, her voice firm, devoid of warmth, "I've received reports. Your recent absenteeism, your distractedness in class. It's simply not like you." Arthur maintained his rigid posture, his hands clasped behind his back. My apologies, Principal. A momentary lapse. Personal matters. Davies leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. Your personal matters are impacting your professional responsibilities, Arthur. Northwood High prides itself on consistency, on order. I need you to refocus. Immediately. Or we'll have to discuss alternative arrangements for your position. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air. Arthur felt a cold dread, but beneath it, a defiant spark. He nodded, his expression unreadable. Understood, Principal. But as he left her office, the weight of her words couldn't compete with the surging tide of his own desperate resolve. He would not stop. Not now. The scent of honeysuckle and damp earth hung heavy in the air, a sweetness that still, after all these years, clung to Arthur's oldest memories. It was summer 1970, and the world felt vast and limitless as he sat beside Evelyn on a sun-dappled riverbank. Her fingers, stained with paint from her latest canvas, intertwined with his. Her eyes, the color of moss after rain, sparkled as she spoke of her dreams. She wanted to paint, to travel, to capture the world's hidden beauty. It would be breathtakingly beautiful, Arthur, she'd whispered, her head resting on his shoulder, a hint of the familiar hyphenated misspelling in her voice. He'd simply held her tighter, believing they were invincible, two stars burning bright against the encroaching night. But even then, a shadow lingered. My parents, my adoptive parents, she'd clarified, her voice barely audible. They don't understand. They want me to be proper, to marry well. They wouldn't approve of us. Her words, though soft, were a chilling prophecy. He'd kissed her then, a desperate, defiant act against the forces he couldn't yet comprehend, against the strictures that would soon tear their innocent world apart. The memory faded, leaving Arthur alone in the sterile quiet of his apartment. The phone, a jarring intrusion, rang precisely at 7. It was Mr. Davies, the private investigator. His voice, a low, clipped monotone. Mr. Pendelton, I have something for you. Arthur's grip tightened on the receiver. Evelyn Jensen. Born 1954, that correct? Yes, Arthur managed, his throat suddenly dry. I found a record. She was adopted in late 1954 from the St. Michael's Home for Children in Old Town, placed with a Mr. and Mrs. Jensen shortly after. The adoption was closed, standard for the time. A cold wave washed over Arthur, then a flicker of desperate hope. Evelyn had been adopted. It wasn't a runaway, not a choice made by her. The orphanage. Another piece of the puzzle, a confirmation that this wasn't some cruel trick of fate, but a thread he could follow. The orphanage record solidified a different, more painful memory. Arthur's childhood home, a fortress of old money and rigid expectations, had become a battleground that autumn. His father, a man whose gaze could freeze oceans, had summoned him to the formal living room. The air was heavy with the scent of aged leather and unspoken disapproval. Arthur, his father's voice, sharp and unyielding, cut through the silence. This infatuation with the Jensen girl, it must end. Arthur had stood defiant, his young heart a drum against his ribs. I love her, father. Love? His father scoffed, a chilling sound. She's from nowhere, Arthur. An orphan. Unsuitable. You have a future, a name to uphold, a legacy. If you continue this folly, your future, your education, everything you've worked for, will vanish. Is she truly worth that? The words were a hammer blow, crushing his youthful rebellion. Evelyn, in her innocent beauty, was deemed a flaw in the perfect tapestry of the Pendleton name. He'd seen the unyielding resolve in his father's eyes, the immovable wall of societal expectation. He had been a boy, powerless against a force that threatened to obliterate his entire world. He'd said nothing, his silence a hollow, agonizing surrender. Back in the present, the shame of that surrender still burned. Arthur stared out at the city lights, a million distant stars against the inky black. His phone rang again. It was Davies. Mr. Pendelton, I have a current address for Evelyn Jensen. It took some doing, given the privacy surrounding adoption records, but I cross-referenced her adoptive parents, death certificates, and then the property records. It's a modest building. 14B Orchard Street. The address hung in the air, a beacon in Arthur's decades of darkness. A modest building. Not the grand, sprawling estate he'd been raised in, nor the pristine suburban home he'd imagined for Evelyn. A knot of dread and urgency tightened in his chest. Orchard Street. The name hummed with the weight of possibility, a fragile thread leading him closer to the woman he had never stopped loving. The moment of truth, a lifetime in the making, was approaching. The old sedan, discreetly parked a block away on Orchard Street, offered Arthur a vantage point into a world he knew nothing about. The apartment building was a tired affair, its brick facade worn by decades of city life. Light spilled from a ground-floor window, illuminating a scene that tore at Arthur's heart. Maya, the student from his English class, moved with a practiced weariness, her small frame supporting a frail woman with wispy gray hair. Evelyn. Her movements were slow, hesitant, a stark contrast to the vibrant, artistic girl he remembered. Maya guided her gently, a protective arm around her mother's waist, easing her into a worn armchair. The flicker of the television cast long shadows across the small, cluttered room. The reality of their struggle was a punch to the gut. This was Evelyn's life, a life of quiet hardship, a world away from the gilded cage he had inhabited. Guilt, a familiar, unwelcome guest, settled heavy in his stomach. He had allowed this. His inaction, his youthful cowardice, had contributed to this quiet suffering. Could he ever truly make things right? The question hung in the cold night air, an echo of a promise unkept for half a century. The soft, persistent rap on her door pulled Maya from her weary morning routine, a jarring interruption to the fragile quiet of the apartment. Her first instinct was a familiar knot of dread, another bill collector perhaps, or a landlord notice. She opened the door cautiously. Barely a crack, her eyes wide with apprehension. Standing in the drab hallway, a stark contrast to the worn linoleum and peeling paint, was Mr. Pendelton, her English teacher, the man of the red pen and unyielding standards. He was dressed in his usual tweed jacket, but his stern academic facade was softened by a nervous tremor in his hands, his usually precise posture slightly stooped. "Miss Jensen," Arthur began, his voice surprisingly gentle, a stark departure from the clipped tones of the classroom. "Arthur Pendelton, I apologize for this unexpected visit, but I need to speak with you, and if possible, with your mother." Maya's confusion was palpable, a defensive wall instantly rising. What could her English teacher possibly want with her mother? His presence felt like a violation of the thin boundary between her school life and the vulnerable reality of her home. Her gaze flickered from his somber expression to the quiet interior of her apartment, where Evelyn sat, humming a tuneless melody by the window. Maya, still wary but intrigued by the sheer oddity of the situation, reluctantly stepped aside. Arthur entered the small living room, his eyes sweeping over the worn furniture, the stacks of medical pamphlets, and finally settling on Evelyn. The air grew thick with unspoken history. He moved slowly, cautiously, towards Evelyn, as if approaching a skittish bird. He knelt beside her chair, his gaze full of a profound, almost painful tenderness that Maya had never seen in him. "Evelyn," he whispered, the name a fragile breath, a sacred echo from a distant past. "It's Arthur. Do you remember me? From high school?" Evelyn, who usually met strangers with a vacant stare, slowly turned her head. Her clouded eyes, the color of a stormy sea, seemed to clear, just for a moment. A flicker of something profound, recognition perhaps, or a deep, buried memory, passed across her face. A single tear, silent and heavy with unspoken history, tracked a path down her cheek. Her frail hand, trembling, lifted, as if reaching for him. Arthur gently took it, his touch soft, reverent. Maya watched, bewildered, a seismic shift occurring in the world she thought she knew. Her mother, lost in a fog for so long, had just acknowledged this stern, unexpected visitor. The question of why, the N20, screamed in Maya's mind. Arthur turned to Maya, his eyes now brimming with unshed tears, but also a fierce, desperate resolve. "Maya," he began, his voice hoarse with emotion, "I know this will sound impossible, but your mother and I, we knew each other, a long time ago." He paused, taking a deep, shuddering breath. 50 years ago, Evelyn and I were in love. We were just kids, full of dreams, but from different worlds. My family, they were strict, powerful. They didn't approve. They forbade me from seeing her. And then, one day, she was just gone. He recounted the story, his words painting a vivid picture of a hidden love, clandestine meetings, and the crushing weight of societal expectations. He spoke of his guilt, his regret, the ghost of Evelyn that had haunted his meticulously ordered life. And then, he continued, his voice cracking, I saw it. In your essay. That word, breathtakingly, misspelled, just like she always did. Maya listened, stunned, her mind struggling to reconcile the stern teacher with the heartbroken young man he described. The pieces, disparate and incomprehensible until now, began to click into place. Her mother's fragmented memories, the unique spelling error, Arthur's inexplicable presence. It wasn't just a teacher visiting a student. It was history, raw and bleeding, knocking on her door. The quiet presence of Evelyn, still gazing distantly, suddenly held a new, profound significance. Maya, her heart pounding, could only stare, her disbelief warring with a dawning, terrifying hope. But how? She whispered, her voice barely audible. How can you be sure? After all this time? Arthur reached into his tweed jacket, pulling out a thick, worn envelope. From it, he carefully extracted several photocopied documents. I hired a private investigator, he explained, his voice quieter now, steadier. It took time, and some unconventional methods, but we found them. He laid the papers on the small coffee table. Faded orphanage records, a birth certificate listing Evelyn Jensen and tracing her adoption, documents that spoke of a life meticulously hidden and erased. Maya's trembling hands reached for them, her eyes scanning the official stamps and dates. The cold bureaucratic language of the documents couldn't diminish the warmth that spread through her, a sense of validation, a sudden, undeniable connection to a past she'd never known. This wasn't a story. It was her history. Arthur watched her, a quiet reassurance in his gaze. He knew the shock, the awe, the relief that came with finally connecting the threads of a long-lost narrative. His own 50-year burden felt, for the first time, a little lighter. The revelation was a tidal wave, reshaping Maya's entire perception of her mother. She looked at Evelyn, slumped gently in her armchair, her face serene in its quiet confusion, and saw not just a sick woman, but a vibrant young girl whose life had been violently rerouted. She saw a mother who had endured loss and hardship with a silent strength Maya had never fully appreciated. The cryptic whispers of a kind boy who loved stars now resonated with heartbreaking clarity. Her mother, this fragile woman, had loved and lost so deeply. Maya felt a profound surge of empathy, a fierce protectiveness. The weight of Evelyn's sacrifices, the life she had been denied, settled upon Maya, not as a burden, but as a legacy. She reached out, taking Evelyn's hand, her fingers tracing the delicate veins. "Mom," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You were so strong." It was more than just a family history. It was a missing piece of her own identity, suddenly found. Maya Jensen was not just a struggling student. She was the living continuation of a love story, a testament to resilience, a beacon of a future that had just impossibly opened up. Arthur, observing Maya's profound realization, knew it was time to move beyond explanations. Words were not enough to mend 50 years of injustice. "Maya," he said, his voice firm with renewed purpose, "I know this is overwhelming, but I didn't just come here to tell you a story. I came to help." He met her gaze, his own unwavering. "I intend to cover all of Evelyn's medical expenses, to ensure she receives the very best care, without you having to worry about a single bill, and to find you both a home that is safe, comfortable, and truly your own." Maya stared at him, stunned, the enormity of his offer hanging in the air. The man who had been her sternest critic, whose red pen had marked her failures, was now offering a lifeline, a future she hadn't dared to dream of. The possibility was breathtaking, terrifying. Her hands, still holding her mother's, trembled. The sudden shift in power dynamics, the sheer generosity, felt almost too much to bear. Could this truly be happening? Could the rigid Mr. Pendleton be offering them salvation? The small apartment, still thick with the echoes of Arthur's revelation, became a crucible for Maya's pride. Arthur's offer, a lifeline shimmering with unimaginable generosity, felt heavier than any burden she had ever carried. "Mr. Pendleton," she began, her voice barely a whisper, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. I can't accept money. We've always managed. It's too much. It's charity." Her gaze darted to the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, then to her mother, lost in a quiet reverie by the window. The thought of relief was intoxicating, but the sudden shift in their dynamic, the sheer magnitude of his proposed intervention, made her deeply uneasy. Her independence, hard-won and fiercely guarded, was a cornerstone of her identity. To accept such help felt like admitting defeat, like erasing every struggle that had shaped her into the person she was. Arthur's steady gaze softened, a profound sorrow etched around his eyes. He reached out not to touch her, but to gently place his hand on the worn wooden table between them. "Maya," he said, his voice raw with an emotion she had never heard from her stern teacher. "This isn't charity. This is atonement. For 50 years, I have carried the weight of a choice I didn't make, but one I failed to fight. I let my family's pride, their fear of scandal, tear me away from the woman I loved. I never fought for Evelyn. I never fought for your mother." His voice broke, a single tear tracing a path down his otherwise impassive face. "Helping you, helping her, is not just about righting a wrong. It's about healing a wound in my own soul that has festered for half a century. It's my chance, Maya, to finally do what I should have done all those years ago. Please, let me do this. For all of us." Maya looked at him, truly seeing him for the first time. Not as the rigid teacher, but as a man haunted by a lifetime of regret, seeking a redemption that only she and her mother could offer. A slow, understanding nod, heavy with emotion, finally broke through her defenses. Days later, the sterile quiet of a private hospital room felt like a balm. Evelyn Jensen, no longer confined to the worn armchair of her apartment, rested peacefully in a pristine bed, the soft hum of medical monitors a gentle backdrop. Arthur had moved swiftly, leveraging every resource at his disposal, securing the best neurologists and round-the-clock care. The lines of worry on Maya's face had begun to soften, replaced by a cautious, nascent hope. She sat by her mother's bedside holding Evelyn's frail hand, while Arthur stood quietly at the foot of the bed, a silent guardian. She's sleeping so deeply," Maya whispered, her voice thick with gratitude. "The nurse said her vitals are stronger." She even smiled, just for a second, when they adjusted her pillow. Arthur offered a faint, gentle smile in return. The room, bathed in the soft afternoon light, was a sanctuary, a tangible manifestation of a love that had defied time and circumstance. It was a new beginning, not just for Evelyn, but for them all. Back within the familiar, if now transformed, walls of Northwood High, Maya Jensen walked with a lighter step. The crushing weight of her responsibilities had eased, allowing her mind, once clouded by anxiety, to soar. In Mr. Pendleton's English class, she approached his desk, not with the usual trepidation, but with a quiet confidence. She placed her latest essay on his meticulously organized surface. Arthur picked it up, his gaze sweeping over the crisp, clean paragraphs. He found no red ink from his pen. And then, his eyes fell upon the word, breathtakingly. It was spelled correctly, perfectly. He looked up at Maya, a proud, almost paternal warmth in his eyes. "Excellent work, Maya," he said, his voice devoid of its usual clipped formality, replaced by genuine admiration. Truly breathtaking. Maya's shy smile was radiant, a testament to the future now blossoming before her, a future where her intellect, not just her resilience, could finally shine. The red pen, once a symbol of her struggles, now represented the path to her liberation. Weeks blurred into a gentle rhythm of visits to Evelyn's room. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the hospital room, Evelyn stirred. Her eyes, usually clouded and distant, cleared with an astonishing, piercing lucidity. She looked at Arthur, a flicker of youthful recognition passing through her gaze, then turned to Maya, her daughter, her protector. A faint, knowing smile touched her lips. "My stars," she whispered, her voice frail but distinct, a breath of air from a forgotten past. Her eyes, filled with a profound peace, settled on both of them, a silent blessing. Maya gasped, tears welling. The cryptic words, the same ones her mother had uttered in fleeting moments of clarity, now held a cosmic significance, linking Arthur, Evelyn, and Maya in an unbreakable constellation of love. Arthur reached for Maya's hand, their fingers intertwining, a shared understanding passing between them, a silent promise to cherish the fragile, holy moment. A sense of completion, of a circle finally closed, settled over the room. The quaint two-bedroom house on the tree-lined street was a world away from the cramped apartment Maya and Evelyn had once called home. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, illuminating a cozy living room filled with comfortable furniture and the scent of freshly brewed tea. Maya sat on a plush sofa, reading aloud from a book of poetry, her voice clear and strong, while Evelyn, her condition stable and her days peaceful, listened, a contented smile on her face. Arthur, a regular fixture in their lives now, entered, a bouquet of wildflowers in hand. He wasn't just a teacher or a benefactor. He was family. On the mantelpiece, nestled among framed photographs, was a faded black and white picture. A young Arthur, vibrant and hopeful, his arm linked with a radiant Evelyn, her eyes sparkling with dreams. It was a testament to the love that had endured, the secret that had waited, and the family that had finally found its way home. The legacy Arthur had always sought, not in accolades or wealth, but in the enduring threads of human connection, was finally his. This was the real inheritance, boundless and eternal.